just got a couple of points that I'd like to emphasize and refer at one point to a handout that we had for you folks, which shows a map of the FAIR satellite locations around the state. There are over 20 of them. They're the most, numerically, the most significant part of the satellite network. I think we talk about the challenges facing the satellite network and facing the industry, but one thing I think is important to remember is that this satellite network that horse racing has in California is a real accomplishment of technical sophistication and industry cooperation. And in the handout you'll see, I think it's important to note the contribution that this network makes to the California industry. In 2009, the FAIR satellite component of the satellite network contributed about over $441 million in handle to California's horse racing business. And that in turn generated revenues, important revenues to purses, to track commissions, as has been noted here, to the operating fund that helps sustain the satellite operations. So it's really a critically important component of California's racing industry. And I think that as we look at the history of it, and we have to look at how it came about, bear in mind that the economic model that created the satellite network and created simulcasting in California was created in 1987 with a bill called SB 14. That's 22 years ago. 23 years ago, depending on how you count it. I think it's probably time for a review of how that works. We're finding that that model is under stress. ADW has come along. ADW is layered over the existing economic model for simulcasting. ADW works on an entirely different model. And we're finding that one of the consequences of the difference between those two models is that as handle migrates from traditional simulcast handle to ADW handle, some of the critically important funds that are based on funds generated by traditional handle, and Guy referred to some of them, the stabling and vanning fund is one, the expense fund that pays for the operation of satellites. The model that was set up in 1987 set up, and this was a wise part of it, set up a parimutuel distribution that would cover the cost of operating simulcasting. That was a good thing. What happened is that when ADW came along, it was layered over that existing simulcast distribution model, and handle moved to ADW. Some of those critically important funds started to experience a shortfall. And that's part of the crunch that we're feeling now.
One of the questions that we've had internally, and I'm getting from the audience, what are we doing in key areas where we're underserved, such as San Francisco? Can we discuss the efforts being made there? Perhaps Robert and Chris, you're both very familiar with the efforts going on to establish. And for those in the audience, many satellites were they were passed by law about 2 years ago. They allow 45 of these. Not a full satellite, but they call them minis. And to date, we've got one in place, but please talk about San Francisco area.
San Francisco for the last 2 years has been the bane of my existence, actually. It's been really, really tough. We spent weeks knocking on doors from Chinatown to North Beach, from areas around AT&T Park, all over the place. And we found 2 locations ready to go. One was called Pete's Tavern, which is right across the street from the ballpark, and another one was a little Italian restaurant called Sotomori. Come to find, those locations were 19.1 and 19.4 miles away from the San Mateo County Fair, which driving distance to get from one to another would probably take you about 45 minutes with San Francisco traffic. Not only did San Mateo stop it, they went on a publicity campaign through the San Francisco Chronicle, local newspapers, to publicly renounce gambling in San Francisco. So they took a pretty harsh view and really put the kibosh on it. So we have many meetings with the San Mateo County Fair. Obviously, they're trying to protect their monopoly. They're very profitable, and you know, one thing about these mini satellites, the TOC and the racetracks are on the same page, right? We want to expand the sport. We want to expand handle, because money flows to purses and money flows to commissions. But some of these fair satellites don't necessarily want that. They're not necessarily on the same page, right? Because if you had a fair satellite, such as San Mateo County Fair, why would you want competition 15 miles away from you, 10 miles away from you, 18 miles away from you? You want to protect your own turf. So we looked at revenue sharing models with San Mateo County Fair, and we still have not been able to come up with anything that's acceptable to them. But remember, you're only dealing with 2% of handle that could be split, so you're not talking about a lot of money.
Robert, can I interject? I'd like to just clarify what the core issue here visually. If you look on the map, remember there's a 20-mile radius restriction. Here's the San Mateo facility, the green dot. We have other satellite facilities here, and the circles are a 20-mile radius. Right here is the tip of San Francisco, so effectively there's the marketplace for San Mateo covers the entire San Francisco Peninsula, which is one of the more denser markets in California. So, you know, let's face it, they have the law on their side, but they have been working diligently, the parties have, to figuring out what can we do without hurting the franchise at San Mateo, yet to exploit underserved markets. And we think there should be some balance in there. Chris, did you want to respond to Robert?
I do. First of all, I'd like to note that the history of efforts to put a satellite facility in San Francisco, for me personally, go back 20 years. We Fairs worked with the legislature and got a bill passed in the early 90s that would allow up to 3 satellite facilities in San Francisco. We made a number of efforts to implement that, and they were invariably blocked by Golden Gate Fields and Bay Meadows. So there's a long legacy of people protecting turf by preventing a satellite facility going into San Francisco. Now, I speak for an organization that represents fairs. We're not necessarily in agreement with the position taken by San Mateo Fair, but that's what the law says. And we're dealing with a legacy element in the law. The 20-mile radius was put into effect by the tracks to protect the tracks from competition from satellite wagering. There's a long history of tracks and satellites struggling with one another about either implementation of a satellite facility, and I can point to battles between Santa Anita and Fairplex about allowing Fairplex to come online. Those were finally resolved. We worked through those. There were struggles between Alameda County Fair and Pleasanton, and respectively Bay Meadows and Golden Gate Fields. We worked through those. And I think this is another situation where the industry has to realize we're dealing with something that's out of date here. We need to come up with a better way of doing it. And I think that, that the past has shown us that we can, we should, and we will. And I'm confident that that will happen.